is with me, and this is Sawyer. And in case people haven't met me, I'm veterinarian Dr. Jeff Nickel. I'm a residency-trained specialist in behavior medicine, and Alana is a credentialed trainer right?
Here at Animal Humane.
At Animal Humane. And we've got this excellent little guy, Sawyer, who's really just here because he's so handsome.
Right. Oh, boy.
So the big thing that we're here to talk about is a big problem right now for a lot of folks who have been at home working because we have a pandemic, and with people getting vaccinated, and some companies really needing their staff to be in the office, they are calling people back in. And one of the problems is that dogs who have had a tendency for separation anxiety over the years, sometimes their people didn't know it. And the reason is that folks came home from work every day and they didn't see a problem. Dog was not house soiling, the dog wasn't barking, there wasn't damage to the house. But what people didn't necessarily recognize was that some of these dogs, when they're alone, are pacing and scanning and panting and agitated and not enjoying the peaceful quality of life we want for them, but nobody knew that. So then folks came home and worked from home for a year and a half maybe, and the dog thinks, wow, I've died and gone to heaven, right? And so now folks go back to work and the dog destabilizes. And if you have a dog who you have any reason for concern may develop separation anxiety when you go back, or you already notice that the dog's greetings when you arrive home are way over the top, or the dog is agitated as it sees you getting ready to go, then we need to get ahead of this ASAP. Mm-hmm. And you folks see some of these cases here at Animal Humane.
We do quite a bit, actually. We have behavior consults here that
right.
Help people figure out what exactly is going on with their dog,
right.
and we create a plan
yeah.
So that folks can follow that plan to help their dog be better. I think the key there is consistency with the dog.
Yeah.
Consistency is key, and patience.
Yeah.
Patience is a big one because, especially with separation anxiety or any other behavioral problem, the issue, the behavior aspect of it, it takes time for any behavior, even in humans, to change. I mean, we
like
have
a lifetime, right?
Right. Sometimes, humans, we have bad habits, and just to change those, such as
yeah.
One that I can think of off the top of my head is nail biting.
Yeah.
It takes a little while
yeah.
for us to change our behavior. Now
right.
imagine in an animal that we can't communicate with talk, right? They can't talk to us.
Yeah.
So we can't tell them, hey, it's going to be all right. In fact, you know what happens sometimes, Doctor, is that sometimes when folks go back to their house and they notice that their dogs are a little bit agitated, they go to them and they say, oh, it's okay, it's all right. And unfortunately, folks don't recognize that that's unintentionally reinforcing that anxious behavior.
It feeds into the problem.
Yes, it does.
We have, there's a pretty good bit of research on this sort of thing. Anxiety and fear, of course, aren't the same thing. Mm-hmm. And when a pet is in the lower to mid levels of anxiety, and people believe that if they say, look, it's going to be all right, I'll be back later, you don't have to worry about it, at the time that they're leaving, which is a time when the dogs are typically pretty agitated because they've been watching their person get ready to go, and they know what that leads to, the dog actually becomes more anxious in that context, and the people leaving home actually have a dog who's in worse shape. Mm-hmm. And what's valuable to remember about this is if we look at the way dogs behave in a free-living social group, as much as they're man's and women's best friend, mm-hmm. and they belong with us without question, what their genetic programming behaviorally is all about survival in the wild. Well, in the wild, they are community creatures, they live as part of a group, and everybody needs to leave the territory at least a couple of times a day to sniff and investigate, also to look for prey or forage for, roadkill, whatever, right? Well, when the leader leaves the territory, it's a non-event. They just leave. Unlike us, when we leave our home, when we go to our family, we have a hug and a kiss, drive safely, hurry home, we'll have dinner, all that kind of normal human stuff. That's not what dogs do. So if you have a dog who's anxious when it's left home alone, and then you treat it like a person in a furry suit, the dog actually, as Alana mentioned, can get much worse. And what you really need to do, especially for an anxious dog who has a heck of a time adapting to things it doesn't innately understand, treat it like a dog. And that is, if your dog were your subordinate and you were its leader in a free-living canine social group and you left the territory, it would be a non-event. You would just leave. And when you get back, it's a nothing happens either. And that's hard for a lot of people to do. They want to make a big fuss, and you have to realize that if you're going to set your dog up for success, you can love that little rascal like a little person in a furry suit, but treat it like a dog. That really matters, right?
Yes, it does.
So, this is a dog I don't think has separation anxiety anyway.
I don't think so.
He's just a good pet. But here's something else that we can do with our dogs when they're home alone, and they can be real dogs in the contrivance of our home, with our carpet and our flat screen TV and our microwave, stuff that dogs don't have in the wild.
Yep.
But, they are predators, and they'll eat what they kill, except they don't get that lucky very often. Typically, what dogs do to subsist and get by in the wild is they find dead junk. And so if you don't feed your dog from a bowl anymore, and you only allow your dog to work hard to figure out how it's going to survive another day, which is another thing that's hard for a lot of people because, hey, we don't do that, do we? We don't root around in the ground looking for, a 3-week-old French fry like our dog always does. But what you can do is you can use things like food toys. So here's one. There's all manner of different kinds. We got a whole bunch of others over there. This is one of the ones I like the best because, I'll tell you why. This is called a twist and treat. And you can see that the insides of this are sort of concave. And what I like to do with these things is I like to put canned food in it. And we'll see if Sawyer is, now don't let him molest my, ooh, this looks quite tasty.
Can you show that to the
Oh yeah, here. This is, you take this thing apart, it's concave, okay? And it's it's flexible. And the best way I like to use these is to put some canned food inside it, like this, and then if you put it in a Ziploc and freeze it overnight,
I agree.
then in the morning you take it out. And by the way, dogs with separation anxiety, I encourage people to stop feeding them from a bowl. In other words, get rid of the dog bowl, and every day, whether you're going to be at home or not, the dog has to forage. People sometimes hide these under the furniture or beneath sofa cushions, or if you have a dog door, you can build a digging box in the north side of your house, and then the dog you bury the food toys. And just like a real dog who is surviving in the wild, they've got to figure out where the food is, and then they have to figure out how to get it out of the food toy. And you notice that this thing, this twist and treat, notice it has this funky shape like a flying saucer kind of thing. Well, that's no accident. This thing is intended to be challenging for the dog to manipulate and hold it still, so that they've got to focus their brain on how in the heck am I going to get this food out of here, and work, and he's not got food from any other source. And when the people leave home, of course they ignore, but they have these food toys already ready, and they drop them on the floor as they walk out the door, and the dog goes, oh wow, now's my chance to survive, because it's the same every day. So as you were saying, Alana, it's consistent.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same every day, and when they come home, they pick them up on the way back in the door. So that this is when the dog focuses their attention and works their paws in their mouth on extracting the food.
Get them. Now, one thing that we see a lot are destructive dogs that
Boy.
have separation anxiety.
You bet,
right?
yeah.
And dogs that tend to be destructive, it can be a little bit of an inconvenience in your home.
Yeah, right.
Just a little bit,
Yeah,
torn
right.
up couches.
Yeah, 15
in my case, right,
Yeah.
I had a dog that ate part of my TV at one point. We had to go to the vet. And it was quite pricey, but
Yeah.
whatever we had to do for the safety of the dog. And for
Yeah.
my dog's case, what we had to do was crate train him. Now, this is something that a lot of folks don't like to do sometimes because, well, they might think that it is putting a dog in a cage. Some dogs like the feeling of having a cave-like structure for themselves. They feel a little more secure. And for my dog, that was definitely the case. One thing that I did to help him become crate trained is I would feed him in the crate. Another thing that I would do is I would do just what you did here and
Right.
put food into a food toy, such as a Kong, even this is great, and freeze it. And I would put it in the kennel with him while I was home, so that he could be safe, make sure that he's not swallowing the toy, right?
Right.
But put him in there for a couple of minutes at a time. In the beginning, just while he ate his food. After that, 5 minutes with a Kong. After he was doing really great with that, then 10 minutes,
Right.
15 minutes,
Right.
20 minutes, until I could build quite a bit of time. That way I could save myself the headache of coming back and not having furniture.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the best way to really understand what's going on with a dog when they're home alone, and find out if they're distressed in a minor way or how quickly after you leave the problem becomes serious, is to have a video camera. If you don't have a home surveillance system, you can, online, you can get a tabletop tripod for $7 to $10. And you just put your smartphone in it and you leave for 20 minutes. You have to drive away so the dog really knows you're gone and go through your normal preparations to leave, but you can come home and find out what the heck was really going on. Now, with crating, there's value in that because dogs are denning creatures. In the wild, they spend part of their time in their own little secure place, and it's got to have a low roof and snug. But in the wild, they always have the option to enter or exit it at their choice. And sometimes if we close the door and they're in there by themselves, they can freak out. And they can cut their lips and break their nails and actually fracture teeth in their frantic escape attempts. So if you think that your dog may do okay confined with the door latched, you better have some video to see what the dog does while you're gone, because they can really, really freak out. And what I've done sometimes is definitely have people use a crate, but leave the door open so the dog has the option. If you use a wire crate, which a lot of people are doing nowadays, you want to cover it with a sheet or a towel, including the door down to the last few inches above the ground, so it feels like a den, because otherwise it's just a wire crate. And it's not. But this little guy, he's working hard on this thing. And when they work their muscles like this, they get good and tired. And a tired dog is a happy dog. Not just because they have the endorphin release and they get tired, and the skeletal muscles of the face and the paws where they manipulate these things, they produce and store more of the neurotransmitter serotonin, which we think of being produced in the brain and reducing anxiety, but you get more of it when they're working. And this dog's working.
Yes, he is. Another thing to think about when
Another
going
food
back
toy
to
here.
the
Oh, it's
whole
over there.
crate thing is that if you are thinking about using a crate, especially to treat anxiety or any other thing like that, please consult your trainer.
Yeah.
Consult your trainer. Sometimes what we perceive as anxiety might be something else if we don't know dog body language well enough.
Yeah.
So absolutely consult your trainer before trying any of that.
Yeah. Video is your friend on these things. And we like to monitor these dogs with video. We see improvements. Well, how much improvement do we have? What do we need to do next? I didn't bring it with me, I should have done. There is a wonderful device that you can order online called the Calmer Canine. It is a targeted pulse electromagnetic field device that sits right behind the head. You do 2 treatments twice a day. There's no sensation. They've got a comfy little thing goes around their neck, just next to their collar, and around their chest, and it connects with a little Velcro thing. And the dog can walk around with you in the morning and hang out with you in the evening, 15 minutes twice a day. And it actually adjusts the neurochemistry inside what are called the microglia, the cells of the amygdala where the fear center of the brain is located. And these twice daily treatments for 4 to 6 weeks, and it can make a very big difference. And there are people who say, well, okay, I'm willing to do this, but I don't want to use medications because that worries people. I'll tell you what, you shouldn't be. These are very well researched and they're very safe, and for the more severe cases, frankly, they're essential or we're not going to get anywhere. And we have lots of choices with medication. General practicing veterinarians can prescribe these. Being a specialist, I know a lot more about it than many, but the behavior modification, the management changes, but the setup for success, whether you use the Calmer Canine or medications, are essential for many of these dogs, or they're just not going to get well. But you can go to the website at CALMER, the letter K, the number 9.com, calmercanine.com. And this is a worthwhile device, and it's the only medical device I know that if you don't like it in the first 30 days, they'll give you a refund. So it's pretty handy. Nothing else is guaranteed, but those things are pretty good. And you know, another point, have you ever seen, Alana, sometimes the most well-intentioned pet parents can lose their patience?
Yes. Now, that is something that I was talking about earlier today, with someone. They have done training for about 1 week, not seeing tons of progress. But the thing with training, especially behavior mod, is that we need to take our time. Patience is key.
Yeah.
Patience is very much key. What I recommend people do sometimes to help them with patience is to have a doggy diary. Now, I have one for every dog that I have owned and every dog that I have trained. Not clients' dogs, but my own dogs. And what I do is I jot down maybe a little note once a day, maybe even once every other day, maybe once a week. It's up to you folks, really. But what I do is after months, and in my case, years of having my dog, sometimes I'll go back to those doggy diaries, open it up, and look exactly how far we've come, because we've come a long way.
There's value in that,
There's
isn't
value in that, and it
That's
helps
right.
me become more calm, because let me tell you, patience is one thing, especially in dog training, that I've had to learn a lot.
Yeah.
I can't be a dog trainer without being patient, not only with dogs, but also with people.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
so, I'm sure you see this as well, especially with the
It's pretty
severe
tasty.
Behavior cases that you tend to see.
Yeah.
So
And
be patient. Take videos. Video is another one of those big.
it's so valuable. You know, there are people where the dog is so frantic, trying to follow their person out of the house. And sometimes people, they stand outside the door and they go, I think things are all right. And then they come home several hours later after a day of work, and the dog's done another $1,500 worth of damage. Ripped a hole in the sheetrock trying to escape next to the exit door, or tear down the window blinds. And dogs can get hurt doing this, but it can get so expensive that people sometimes relinquish their dog because they feel they can't afford to treat them. Or we get people contacting us going, I've tried everything. Well, maybe everything but a real honest-to-goodness diagnosis and a real research-based behavior modification plan, and everything else that can become a part of that. And people sometimes punish their dogs.
After the fact. And
Yeah.
that doesn't,
That
and
is-
what's going on with dogs is that dogs, they learn in the moment.
That's right.
They learn
It's
very much in the
exactly
moment.
right. Yep.
Once things have passed, punishing the dog for something that it did in the past,
Yeah.
the dog's not really going to understand that moment in time. I don't
Right.
understand. I was so happy that you came home, you know?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
One thing that we sometimes recommend to the folks that their dog does have separation anxiety, or they're very anxious of being alone, keep in mind, please talk to your trainer before you do any of this. But what we do here at the center is that we have daycare and boarding. So sometimes if the dogs are not okay at home,
Absolutely.
but they're okay in the presence of other people, of other dogs, and if they pass their interview, they can join us for a day of doggy daycare, for a day of day
That's
play,
pretty tasty,
or
huh?
for a day of day boarding. I'll explain what both of those are. Daycare is where your pup plays with other pups. In our play yards, we have 2 yards, large dog and outdoor,
Hold that
indoor,
leash for me.
outdoor
There we go.
access. 1 indoor for both yards and 2 large outdoor places for both. And we also have, again, day boarding. This is where your dog stays with us throughout the day in their suite. They get taken out 3 times a day for 20 minutes, where we can throw a ball, we can go on a walk with them, but we spend time with them while also giving them time to adjust and adapt on being alone in their suite. So again, lots of breaks there. Lots of breaks.
And
Please
you-
talk to your
Yeah,
trainer.
that's so, and I'm really glad you brought that up,
Yeah.
Alana, because the business of teaching a dog, desensitizing a dog to being home alone, and independence training, and graduated absences, and some of these techniques that we use for these dogs, it can be frustrating and challenging.
Especially for one person, or even 2.
That's right, and I have known people who say, do I really need to do that? Could I simply take my dog every morning on the way to work and drop it off at doggy daycare and then pick him up on the way home? And the answer is absolutely you can. You don't have to rustle this monster to the ground. If your dog doesn't have the problem because it isn't home alone, what's wrong with that? Many of these dogs are perfectly behaviorally well adjusted in all other respects. You don't have to face this thing if you can afford to take it and leave it at doggy daycare every day. And some people do that. And if they're going to go someplace when doggy daycare is closed, they might have a friend or a family member with a dog, and the dog can stay at their house, and you can return the favor. And there are ways of dealing with this that you don't have to actually treat the problem. It's not essential. But I'm glad you made the point, Alana, about people who punish the dog when they get home. There are folks who, well, they anthropomorphize without realizing it. They say, they come home and they go, this dog is punishing me for having left her at home. No. We've got a lot of research on this problem, and there's nothing to support that. In fact, we have good genomic studies that show that most dogs with separation anxiety are genetically predisposed. People sometimes come into us and they think, oh, I've made this mistake and I've done this wrong, and they take all this blame. And the reality is that, no, don't go down that path. These dogs tend to be genetically predisposed to this problem. Another good example is noise phobia, fireworks and thunderstorms. And in fact, 30% of dogs with separation anxiety also have noise phobias. These things are genetically linked in many dogs. So if your dog has this problem, we're going to play the hand we're dealt, and we're going to do everything we can to make it better. But no, we don't blame the dog, and we don't blame the person. We just deal with it. Are there any questions that people have? You seen?
Well, we got one question about what the twist and treat is.
Yeah, this is a yeah. Sawyer's over here. He's working on this thing, but yeah, it's called the twist and treat, and you can Google it. There are so many others. Here's another one that I like a lot. This is called a Topple food toy. Toppl.
I apologize, folks. It is a little bit.
It's a little gooey there, yeah.
Perfect.
Can you see that?
See how there's food in there? I can bring it over to you.
And you can make that more challenging by screwing it together a little closer. And they come in different sizes. So those things are, you can have different size twist and treats, and the dog has to work differently to get the food out. We like to have a variety of these. Here's another one that is a big hit. This is called a Topple, Toppl. It's got a hole in one side, but you see it's got these little fingers inside, and it's pliable but pretty firm rubber. And so I like to put canned food in this and stick it in a Ziploc and freeze it overnight. And I always mention, take it out of the Ziploc before giving it to the dog,
Yes.
so the dog doesn't eat the Ziploc bag. It takes a lot of work to dig the food out of these things. And that's the whole point. In fact, Jenny, would you kind of roll a few more of these over? I mean, there's such a variety. Yeah, any of that stuff. There's such a variety of food toys. And the best ones for your dog are the ones your dog uses. This, no, you know what? I've never seen one of these.
I love those. So
Now, you put the food in, the dry food in it, right?
So you twist
Yeah.
it off.
Okay.
You put the dry kibble in the little
Inside.
chute.
Yeah.
In the little chute, you put it in this one.
Okay.
And then you twist it up, and then the dog has to roll this ball around.
And it's got these holes in there.
Yeah, to try and get it out of there.
It's a little bit like a food cube. A food
Kind of.
cube, you have to push it
I've seen
around,
those.
and a kibble, nibble. I
I've
mean,
heard
these
those.
things go on forever. And the best, thank you. This is a Kong wobbler is what that's called, right?
I love Kong wobblers.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. The only issue that I have seen with these is that some dogs, not all dogs, and not most dogs, but some dogs will get very frustrated
Yeah.
with these things. Now, you know your dog more than anyone, probably. So, with that being said, watch their body language, listen to them, see what they're trying to tell you, and if they're getting really frustrated and vocalizing and
Do
looking
something
at
else,
it,
right.
let's do something else.
Exactly.
Let's get a toy that's much easier to handle. So I love
Yeah,
these
this one here.
puzzle
Yeah.
bowls.
Yeah.
And what I do sometimes for puppies, dogs that are starting to discover
Oh.
puzzle toys, or when
Yeah.
you're starting out your puzzle toys, what we do, those are great too.
Yeah.
But you put the kibble in here as well as wet food, stick it in the freezer.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
then the dog has to work on something easier than say the Kong wobbler or
Yeah.
say the twist and treat.
Yeah.
And it does help.
You know-
It helps them just have a leg up in knowing what the expectation is of this toy and not being
Right.
frustrated that they
Right.
can't get it.
Sometimes I've had people come in on a follow-up with a separation anxiety case, and they go, well, I'm really proud of my dog. It used to take him a while to get all the food out. Now he can do it in 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, now we need to make this a lot more challenging. Because the whole point of these things is, yeah, we want them to get good and tired. We want them to focus on something canine specific in the absence of their person, instead of wringing their little hands about, oh my goodness, my person's never coming home.
Yeah.
Okay? But we want them, if possible, to stay occupied, surviving pretty much all day long.
Right?
And that's why if we can bury them, if you got a dog door and you build a digging box outside, and then you bury the food toys under a few inches of sand or loamy dirt,
Yeah.
or under furniture, and they're in different places and they're different kinds of food toys, and you rotate them so the dog goes, how am I going to survive today? Well, that you say, isn't that stressful? Wouldn't it be better if I just fed my dog from a bowl? Well, it's a dog, and in the wild, they're not cruising around the wilderness and saying, oh, look, a bowl of Purina. No, that ain't what happens. Instead, they work hard. A natural, appropriate stress is, where will I get my next meal? And your dog can do that during the day instead of freaking out. And so, ideally, these toys are challenging enough that they're working all day long on this, and you don't have a dog food bowl anymore. This is the way it is every day.
I sometimes recommend folks, especially when doing training, to ditch the bowl and do training with their food. But in this case, for, again, anxiety and things like that,
Yeah,
food toys are great.
yeah,
So
they're
that
pretty
works
handy.
too. But yes, I concur. Please ditch the bowl.
Yeah, right. So, I don't know, what else? Anything else you want to add at this point, Alana?
Not necessarily about separation anxiety. I think we covered it. We do behavior consults. You do behavior
Yeah,
consults
yes.
as well.
Mhm.
If you'd like to let them know your email address or your...
Well, the easiest way to learn about veterinary behavior medicine is on my website, which is drjeffnickel.com, drjeffnicol.com. No S on my name. Almost all of my cases are referrals from general practicing veterinarians, but occasionally people just contact my office, and I'm happy to help. But it's all research-based. It's all the diagnostics. And the other important thing about behavior medicine is that the first thing we do before we make a behavioral diagnosis is evaluate the whole creature, all the body systems, not only a thorough exam and a lab profile, but we look for sources of pain, smoldering ear infections, dental disease, joint pain, abdominal pain, respiratory disease, things that can influence the behavior, and problems like liver or kidney failure that could not only cause the dog to behave in abnormal ways, but if we're going to use medication, we need to know that we can do it safely. So the whole creature needs to be evaluated on these things, and then we custom fit our behavior modification and all of our treatments to the individual. But this dog was a great little subject for this, Sawyer, because he'll eat anything, anytime, and you can tell that he does.
Loves food, loves food.
All right.
All right, folks. Just to reiterate, we do have daycare and boarding here. If you were interested in that, you do have to email the center at animalhumane.org, just like that. The center at animalhumane.org. NM.org, my bad. There isn't an NM as in New Mexico on there, so once again, the center at animalhumanenm.org. Send us an email. We can contact you about boarding, training, and or daycare. But yeah, folks, this was great.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I hope this was helpful. And beyond in-depth 2-hour consultations, I also do groups, Zoom groups that are much less expensive. And you can do that on the website too. But yeah, there's a lot of good ways of getting help. Please don't throw up your hands and say, oh, I've tried everything, until you've really tried everything.
All right.
Okay.
See you, folks.
Thank you. Next
Thank
week,
you.
we'll be back.
Bye.